Hello, everybody. I'm going to spend some time today talking about what it takes to actually put on a festival. There are a number of people involved, and I'm going to refer to that today as your festival team. So it's going to be a lot of people, so get ready for this, and there's a lot of duties to perform. So let's move right on to it. Your team is going to be a number of different folks. The first people on the team will be the executive committee. There is almost always an executive committee, whether you want there to be or not. It's the people that are either the head of the company that's putting on the festival, or people that are the head of the organization that's putting on a festival. It may be a city, it may be a club, it may be a festival public group, it could be any number of different things. But festivals are run the same no matter what. We are assuming here that these are all for profit festivals, that you do, in fact, have to make money on these events in order for them to continue happening year after year. So let's just assume for the moment that we're trying to do a for profit festival. Your executive committee is going to be the ones that oversee the finances, the overall finances of the event. They will most likely either choose the talent or say, we want groups like this, and give you some examples of what it is they are trying to do with this particular festival. Also, the style of music, what type they're looking for. So they may or may not actually choose the talent, but they will at least give it some direction. They're also responsible to find sponsorship, the money to pay for the event. And they are responsible for getting the insurance for the event. They're responsible for renting any extracurricular types of things, such as vehicles, vans, cars, limousines, whatever it is that you may need to run a festival. That has to all go through the executive committee, because they are the ones with the checkbook, and they're the ones that can get insurance for the event. So, what types of insurance might there be? Well, the obvious one is general liability. Certainly, every festival must have general liability, sometimes referred to as slip and fall insurance, meaning that if somebody gets hurt, then the insurance will cover that. Most policies were going to be for that sort of thing. They're going to have a $2 million limit on them, and they're going to have a two event $1 million each type of coverage. Some may go as high as 5 million. But that'll be for five separate events for $1 million each. So you be ready for that. You might also need liquor liability. Liquor liability, of course, covers you from things that happen from the sale of alcohol, and that could be any number of things. It could be physical altercations. It could be people that get in wrecks while drinking, after drinking at your location. It could be any number of things. You will need insurance for your vehicles if you rent vehicles. You can also get rain insurance in the event your festival is rained out. It will pay at least some of it back. Rain insurance is expensive, but it may be worth it to you to get that. You might find that it's a necessary thing. Okay, so that's the executive committee, but the main thing the executive committee is going to do is pick the festival director. The festival director could be somebody that's on the executive committee, but it's probably not, because usually those folks aren't the festival professionals. You need somebody who really knows their business to be the festival director. And you see here that I have festival director is the boots on the ground. That is the person who is responsible for everything that happens at a festival. And we're going to talk about a whole lot of people here. And the festival director, well, he may choose and probably will pick a great number of these people, but he will work very closely with all of these people in the planning of the festival, so that when the festival starts, they will know exactly what their jobs are and they will be able to do them. And the festival director can not be so busy. Uh, the festival director should not do any of these jobs once the gates open at a festival that I'm going to talk about here. He should be the one that's overseeing everything and that's troubleshooting, putting out the fires that are invariably going to start as soon as the gates open. So, without further ado, here's the people that the festival director will be working with. The number one person, of course, is the talent booker. He is the first person that you need to get involved. The talent booker is going to be the one, and it may be the festival director himself. This is a job that a lot of festival directors are capable of doing. But he's the one who's going to call all of the agents for the artists that the executive committee wants, or the types, and he's going to find out who's available, what's available. He's going to figure out how much it's all going to cost and go back to the executive committee and say, this is what this act costs. Do you want them? And if they say yes, well, then you go ahead and you book it. It's a kind of a long process. It's going to take a few weeks to book everything for a festival. You're not going to be able to do it in a day. It's going to take several weeks to book it, so be sure that everything gets started ahead of time. And as a booker, the booker will get all the contracts done, executed, including he will negotiate not only the contracts but the riders that go with them, which are a part of the contract. And riders, of course, can be a number of different things, but mostly it's hospitality, and production. Those are the two big things that you would find and would need riders for. The next person that the executive that the festival director is going to hire is going to be the site manager. This is the hardest job in the history of festivals, or just about anything else. So once the acts are booked and you know what site you're going to use, and you have to have, of course, a site that's going to be able to hold the number of people and the number of stages that you want. A festival can be multi-stage. So it's going to have room where you can put stages where they won't interfere with each other. And it could be, a site could be anything. It can be downtown city streets. It can be the middle of an empty field, or anything in between. But the first thing that the site manager is going to do is to draw up a diagram to scale of the site. And it may be that you would need an architect or somebody to do that, because that's not really a process that a lot of us are capable of. But you do need a schematic, and you do need it drawn to scale, and that will become obvious as to why you need that later on as we come down. So some of the things that the site manager will do will oversee the building and management of the site. And of course, all the planning that goes into it. But what might that include? Well, first of all, you're going to have some kind of crowd control at the gates. Got to be entrances. There has to be fencing or buildings or something that prevents people from getting in, except at specific locations. And those specific locations would be where the gates are and where the tickets are being sold. This is all stuff that we call infrastructure, which is kind of mandatory. Other things that would be mandatory for infrastructure would be running water. You must have running water for food vendors. You can't not have water. They have to have places to wash their hands. They have to have water to cook with. They have to have water to wash all of their cooking supplies. So you can't have a festival without running water. Certainly electricity is of equal importance. You can't have a festival without electricity. So you either have to have electricity that's it comes in through wires, or you have to have generators, or some combination of both. It takes a lot of electricity to run stages. It takes even more electricity to run cooking facilities. It takes a lot of lights. It takes all sorts of different things that use electricity. It takes beer coolers. It takes all kinds of refrigeration equipment. It takes a number of things to run a festival that require electricity. So you have to be sure that you have plenty of power available. And depending on where your festival is, in a field, you may not have that power. You may have to use generators, and generators are big, they're expensive. It takes very large generators to run all of this, so be ready for that. Or if you're downtown, you can have power run through your local electrical people. We'll be happy to set it up for you. You need festival offices. Offices are usually found backstage at various places, but there needs to be offices so people can have a place to meet with tour managers, to meet with each other, so that committees can meet, so that money can be counted, so that things can be done in a secure location away from the crowd. So festival officers are somewhat mandatory. You got to have porta-johns. You can't have a festival without porta-johns. Generally speaking, you need one porta-john for every 100 people that you're expecting at the festival. So if you're expecting 10,000 people, you can do the mathematics and come up with the number of porta-johns. Remember that if it is a multi-day festival, porta-johns must be serviced each and every day. So at the end of the day, or sometimes during the night or before the next day starts, you'll have to have the company come in and dump the porta-johns and clean them up and resupply them with hand sanitizer and toilet paper and all of that mandatory stuff. You got to have Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is mandatory now. Didn't used to be, but now it is, because you can't run tickets without Wi-Fi, because the ticket gates are all going to have scanners to scan tickets, and they have to be able to communicate with a central database of tickets that have been sold. You're going to need tents, and you're going to need a lot of tents. You need tents for all the vendors are going to want tents, and you need to supply those. Now they will ultimately pay for them, but you need to be able to book those, supply those, have them set up. You'll need tents for all different types of things, for merchandising, for first aid, you name it, there's going to be a tent. Probably for beer sales, maybe for beverage sales, any number of things. So be prepared for tents. And you also need tables and chairs, because people have to sit down to eat, sit down to work in their office space, sit down to count money. You have to have tables and chairs for that. Signage around a festival site is plentiful. There has to be directions to here and directions to there, and things have to be labeled. So to be sure and get the signage prepared and put out ahead of time. Golf carts have become an important part of festivals, particularly on larger festival grounds, to move around. A number of people have to move between stages and have to move to the offices and have to move to vendor booths, have to move all over. So golf carts are extremely helpful. It's just makes it better for everybody. One thing that I did not put in here that I probably should have is cleanup. The festival director is responsible for being sure that the site is cleaned every day. Might also need to be cleaned at various points during the day, but anytime you do a festival, if it starts, even if it's a one-day festival or a multi-day festival, the next morning it needs to look like it did before the festival was ever there. Every event needs to be cleaned up and finished and ready to go to use for something else, or to just look great by the next day. So everything needs to be cleaned up, and it needs to be cleaned overnight. The whole site needs to be struck overnight. Everything needs to be done quickly, so that nobody even knows there was a festival there on the next day. So that's important for the site manager to oversee.